Small French electric cars, they're like buses, aren't they? You spend years waiting for one and then two appear at the exact same time. This is the new Citroen E-C3, and while its unveil last year didn't exactly garner the same fanfare as the upcoming Renault 5s did, it is just as important and exciting a car. Why? Because it's the exact thing that we've been screaming out for years now, namely a small, cheap, practical electric family car with enough range to be your one and only vehicle. The question is it any good, or is it, as the French say, a little bit boof?
Love the Fully Charged show? Then join us live in Canada this September, the South in October, and Australia and London in 2025.
Oh, I'm excited about this today. Forget about hyper EVs, forget about 200 miles an hour and rear wheel steer. Give me small, French, squashy and a bit of field and I'm good to go. Welcome to the Citroen E-C3. This car's a big deal, and here's a couple of numbers to illustrate why. Number one, 30% of all Citroens sold globally are C3s. So the fact that it's gone electric is a fairly big deal. It's their volume seller. Number two, £22,000, just under £22,000. That's going to be the starting price for this car in the UK. An even cheaper version is coming after that with a smaller battery. So we're not talking relatively affordable, we're talking genuinely affordable. And they're coming thick and fast now. This is the year for small, cheap electric cars. We're going to see this, we're going to see the Dacia Spring, the new Renault 5. Who knows? Elon might pull a Tesla Model 2 out of his arse. He'd have to get his head out of it first, obviously. A very exciting year for new electric cars, but the fact that there are so many small, cheap EVs on the way means that this being cheap isn't enough. It also has to be charming, interesting, have a little intrigue, a little je ne sais quoi. So does it? Well, let's have a little look around it and see if we can find some. So just a very speedy walk around the exterior of the car. Sorry, it's a bit mucky. To find this beautiful location in rural Austria, we had to come possibly the wrong way up a possibly one way, possibly cycle only gravel track, but we're English. We're English. What do we like, eh? What do we like? Brits abroad. These are very good. These you can change the colour of these. That's the most important thing about the whole car. A little bit of customization. You can have ones that are the France flag or, you know, different colours. I like it. The main story at the front though, actually, aside from the little tiny colour changey bits, is the Ollie influence. Remember the Citroen Ollie concept that we filmed, I'm going to say last year? For me, this is the first Citroen that really starts to employ the concepts we saw in that car in terms of clever manufacturing processes, which we'll talk about later, but also just from a design standpoint. So we've got that new Citroen badge, which I really like. And then we've got this new look headlight design with the kind of what's like 3/4 of a square. Do you know what I mean? That one's not there. Otherwise, it's three lines. It's three lines like the Citroen Ollie, and it's smart looking. It's a little kind of spiggy nosed, I think I said when I first clapped eyes on it, and I stand by that. It's stumpy and chunky and rugged and robust. And as we come around the side, very much on the crossover side of things, they've prioritized height. So it's the same footprint as the outgoing C3, but it's a little bit taller. The seats are a little bit higher, the ground clearance is a little bit higher. Theoretically, that's going to make it easier to get in and out if you're a bit old or your back's a bit knackered. Additionally, it's going to afford extra room inside, and space is something they're really prioritizing with this car, despite the fact that it's barely 4 meters long. In fact, let's do the backseat jack test now, because this is one of the outstanding things about this car for me. Again, we're talking about a B-segment, dinky EV here, and not bespoke EV architecture. There's a petrol version of this car. So how's this work? How is it that you can get a whole jack in the back? Look at this, look at the rear headroom. That's bloody impressive. You might think they've done it by making the boot absolutely minuscule, and it's a little bit narrow, but it's 310 litres, and it's tall and it's deep. There's a big fat lip, so that's not ideal for getting heavy stuff in, but not a bad size boot. That's all of our camera equipment and all of Andy's pretty outfits for this evening. He managed to get all of them in. He brings a lot of clothes on these trips. And just a quick word on battery and range, because as I mentioned in the opening, I think this car has enough to be your one and only car, unless you drive extremely long distances on a very regular basis. So 44 kilowatt hour battery, 199 miles WLTP range. I think for most people that's going to be plenty. And again, starting at less than £22,000 in the UK. Better still, if you can make do with less, there's going to be another version with a smaller battery, 29 kilowatt hours. That will come in at less than 20 grand starting price, I suspect. Just a reminder, as recently as 4 years ago, if you wanted a small electric car with 125 miles of range, you were looking at Honda E's or Mini Electrics in excess of 30 grand. This is a very clear sign that things are heading in the right direction and fast. Now, here's the thing about cheap cars. You have to make them cheaply, or your company will go out of business. That means when you're designing a small, cheap electric car, you have to keep things simple, sensible, and pragmatic. You can't blow the bank in every department. What you can do, however, is pick one department, one area, to spend just a little bit more money, a little bit more time, to ensure that your small, cheap car isn't just a dreary, soulless econo box, to ensure that it has a little bit of something to it, some personality, some charm. And the area where Citroen has spent the extra money with the E-C3 is evidently comfort. This is a lovely, lazy, relaxing little squasher of an electric car. It's the smallest ever Citroen to be fitted with the brand's trademark advanced comfort suspension. What does that mean? Well, I'm actually going to tell you geekily now, because I read the press release, I processed it, and now you have to listen. In short, it's a pair of hydraulic bump stops at each corner. And what they do is when you hit a really nasty bump, one that would cause the suspension to really bottom out and give you that nasty jarring feeling, it just slows down the compression into something much gentler. And then instead of bouncing back up, giving you that kind of springy feeling, it just dissipates the shock away. You don't have to understand what that means. As you can probably tell, I only half understand what it means. The bottom line is, this is an exceptionally comfortable little electric car. It's just so relaxing to drive, and comfort and relaxation is a really clever thing to prioritize in a cheap car, because of course, there's no settings, there's nothing to fiddle with, and that would make it feel barren if it was sporty or fast. But because it's designed to be relaxing, the fact that I have no drive modes, that I can't adjust the weight of my steering, just adds to the sense of simplicity and therefore relaxation. There's nothing to worry about, there's nothing to think about. 2 pedals, steering wheel, lovely squashy suspension. It's very quiet as well. We're in a really middle of nowhere, quiet Austrian town, but I feel sure that they've put a lot of sound deadening into this car, because it's just so peaceful in here. And there's none of that uncouth, face-melting acceleration that we've become so used to with electric family cars here. Oh no, this is modestly powered. 111 brake horsepower, single motor front-wheel drive, 0 to 60 in 10.4 seconds, I believe. Top speed just north of 80 miles per hour, so it'll do motorways, but not much more than that. And again, all of this, the modest power, the incredibly relaxed throttle mapping, this little teeny tiny steering wheel with the lightest steering I have ever felt on a production car, the lack of any buttons or settings for the driving modes, and the wonderfully comfortable suspension and seats, just amounts to a car that I want to drive slowly and calmly and in a relaxed manner. I don't feel like I'm in a rush when I'm driving the E-C3, and that just makes me drive more efficiently. And it is mighty efficient, by the way, or at least it has been today. We've been driving mostly along these sweeping 40, 50 mile per hour B roads, and today we've been getting 13.1 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which I think works out to about 4.7 miles to the kilowatt hour. That's bloody efficient. And again, it's partly because the car is so slow and modestly powered. It's partly because it's reasonably light for an electric vehicle. Of course it is, it's quite small. But it's also because I'm in no rush, because the car makes me feel calm and relaxed. Should have bought one of these instead of going to therapy. It's much cheaper. Right, so we need to talk about this interior, because I think it's just about spot on. Because what's this car about? It's about being cheap, simple, comfortable, and relaxing. That's how it drives, that's how it's supposed to feel, and that is all reflected in this interior. So sure, I've got some slightly cheap plastics, and sure, I've got lots of generic Stellantis switchgear, and sure, my infotainment screen isn't the biggest and has as much bezel as a TV from the 90s, but I don't care, because it's not a Rolls Royce, is it? Incidentally, this infotainment screen, you only get this on the posh spec. The entry-level car just has a phone mount, and then there's a special app where you use your phone, connected to the USB-C port here, to operate the radio and the navigation and the settings of the car. That's fantastic. Love to see that. So no, the car isn't adorned with gadgets and gizmos, but who cares? Don't need them, don't want them. This is a cheap, simple car. What I do have, however, is the greatest luxury of all: space. Abundant space. This is real witchcraft. I don't know how they've managed to get this much room into such a small car when it's not even a bespoke EV. Look, this is wasted space. That could have been open plan, but I don't really care because it's so low down. And again, just tons of headroom, tons of legroom. This is exactly how I'd have the seat. You've seen there's room for another me behind me. That's really impressive. Big fan of these advanced comfort seats, nice and squashy, nice and relaxing, really complement the squashy suspension setup. What else? We've got a hilariously small steering wheel, maybe the smallest I've ever seen on a production car. It's an interesting shape, it's interesting to hold. It feels really nice when held in the 2:45, I'm on a driving lesson position. Ergonomically, just really satisfying. I will say, doing this doesn't really work, doing this doesn't really work, and letting it slide through your fingers doesn't really work because it's an oval. But I forgive it because it looks good and it's got physical, clicky buttons. Praise be. This is not going to take very long because there isn't much else. Lovely fabric across the dash, little textured effect in the plastic. It's just the little things that make a cheap, simple car a little bit more interesting, like that. I like the heads-up display. That's what Citroen are calling it. It's essentially just a little screen, but right below the driver's eye line so that you barely have to glance down to get that essential information. And again, virtually nothing to fiddle with. There's no settings whatsoever. You can have regen or no regen, but you can't adjust the weight of your steering. There's no sport mode, there's no eco mode. If you need eco mode, drive slower. I love that about it. I love the simplicity of this car. But I will say, one thing I could have done with on this higher spec version: heated seats, heated steering wheel, heat pump as well. Those are a miss as far as I'm concerned. So the $1 million question then, how on earth have Citroen made this car so cheap? How is it possible that this costs £10,000 less than a Jeep Avenger, for example, one of its Stellantis siblings? A fabulous car, but one that by no means feels 10 grand more expensive than this. Well, I did some actual journalism for once last night at dinner, and I was putting these questions to the designers and engineers of this car. Tell me how you've done it. What's the secret? And the answer, it seems, is by keeping things very simple. Do you remember the Citroen Ollie concept that we looked at last year? Well, a lot of the ideas from that car appear to have trickled down to the E-C3 in terms of lightweighting and building a car from fewer components. So, it's about to get very geeky. Get ready for this. The Citroen E-C3 is the fastest Citroen ever in terms of how quickly they can build them. And that makes it cheaper to make. Of course, they can turn them over quicker. They can make more of them in a shorter amount of time in the factory. And that's partly thanks to the fact that the Citroen E-C3's platform, the multi-energy platform it sits on, consists of 25% fewer parts than the previous one, again, making it cheaper to produce. It's also lighter. That means it can make do with a smaller battery because it's more efficient. That makes it cheaper. The battery used in the car is LFP as opposed to NMC as used in other Citroen products. That makes it cheaper. Even the model lineup is outrageously simple. There are 2 trim levels of this car and 5 colours, and that's it. There's one wheel, there's one alloy. You can't choose from different rims. There's not 17s, 18s and 19s. There's not going to be a diesel. There's not going to be an all-wheel drive version. And all of this just enables the production of the car to be as simple and quick and efficient as possible, which in turn enables that low price. Is it perfect? Goodness no. The infotainment screen genuinely is a little bit dated. I would just go for the version without, personally. The steering wheel is a little bit style over substance. It looks great, but it is quite weird to use, in my opinion. And the omission of heated seats and heated steering wheel is a miss for me. But those niggles aside, it is a charming little car. So relaxing and enjoyable to drive. And above all else, really bloody cheap. It's about time, isn't it? Do you know what? I don't think I'd be overstating it to say that this feels like a bit of a milestone for electric vehicles. The Citroen E-C3 for me is the first genuinely cheap electric family car with enough range to serve most people as their one and only car. And we all knew that that EV was coming soon. I just think a lot of us assumed it was going to come from some Chinese brand who we hadn't heard of 2 years ago. But no, it's a Citroen. And this gives me hope that maybe, just maybe, it's not end times for legacy auto, that maybe these brands aren't going to be swallowed whole by their Chinese competitors in the next 5 to 10 years. Brands like Citroen are still very much alive and they are pulling every lever at their disposal to stay competitive on price. And the new E-C3, it's not just competitive. For me, this is the new benchmark for cheap electric cars. So there we go, Citroen E-C3. The future is simple. The future is squashy. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have been, thanks for watching.